Welcome all in, everybody, for another edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. If you haven't already done so, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the follow button on your favorite streaming service and follow on social media at unofficial WCC pod and unoff WCC pod on Twitter. A few things to get to in this one. We're going to talk a little bit about the NBA draft, specifically about Jonathan Mogbo, and we're going to have USF head coach Chris Gerlufsen come on the show to really talk about him, where the program is at this point, and a USF team that had a pretty strong offseason, when also you consider who they all brought back into the fold, which I think this USF team is going to be kind of right back in the mix of where they were a year ago. Gonzaga adding the finishing touches onto their roster. But I want to start on something that's a little bit more global to the college basketball world, or impact of college basketball. But really, as we know, this is a college football driven item. Is that it was that there was a report out this past week that the Big 12 is in conversations with Allstate, the insurance company, for naming rights of the conference. And I don't mean the Big 12 conference sponsored by Allstate. I mean, Allstate could be within the name of the conference itself. And we knew that, I think many of us have at this stage know that everything in college sports was for sale. Between NIL, sponsorships, TV deals, the way realignment has gone, we know that almost everything has gone up for sale. But it felt like maybe the one thing that would not be for sale was the names themselves. And yes, maybe the Big 12 was a little bit ridiculous at this point anyway, because now there's 18 teams in the league. But there was something to be said about that. The name SEC, the name ACC, the name Pac-12, the name Big 10, that the names of these conferences were almost the one thing that seemed untouchable, or the one thing that seemed to make the most sense of you don't change it as a sponsor name for that. But clearly that is not the case anymore. The Big 12 has opened up the door to that, and I'm sure that maybe some other conferences have had that conversation as well. The Big 12, I'm sure, is not the first one to really have the conversation, but they're the first who look like they are about to make that final step and take in the cash to be able to say that their name itself, their identity, is up for sale. And in amongst all the other things that I have just rubbed me the wrong way over the last few years of, this is up for sale in college basketball, this is up for sale in college sports. This one, it's not a final straw, but it's definitely like, it now makes you realize that it really is, it's all about the dollar. And maybe a bit naive to think that it wasn't always that way, but this takes it to another level for me. This takes it to another level to say, it's like, oh, does that mean in time the WCC will sell its naming rights, and it won't be the WCC anymore, and it will end up being sponsored by Oracle, sponsored by Starbucks, who sponsored by, I don't know, let's say for the sake of picking a basketball one, it ends up being sponsored by Wilson. Could ends up being sponsored by New Balance. Who knows how this could all end up breaking down and breaking out moving forward. And it's definitely, again, it rubs me the wrong way. This is just one more thing on the college athletics front that just seems to be breaking down more and more. And again, I'm not going to go to the level of saying like the amateurism of the college level, but it has taken away so much of the spirit, I think, of what I think we as fans really have loved about college athletics. The fact that it isn't at that high professional level, that it is still a place where you can watch watch younger adults develop into what they are going to be professionally, that they turn into adults as we watch them over the course of their college career. And there's something to be said about how we get to share that experience with those student athletes. And that has been kind of the thing over the course of time with college sports. And you got to have a little bit maybe of a greater of attachment, especially if you were an alum of one of those schools, that this is someone that quote unquote represents you, and that you want to be able to kind of say, it's like, hey, here's the type of person, the type of character of someone who goes to my university, my school, and you want to be proud of that. And we're now at this, and over the last, let's say 5-10 years, it's obviously that has deteriorated a bit because of the transfer portal, because of NIL, because of things like this. It has changed quite a bit, but there's still that lasting feeling. And I know I'm still that way in many respects, of like wanting to say, like, oh, this person went to St. Mary's, I'm going to like really support them, or they went to the USF and I'm going to be on board with them. I think many alums are the same way when it comes to that sort of thing, especially those who do follow college athletics. It's like, that is an important thing. That is important to those fans. And seeing the announcement of the Big 12 saying that they're going to likely have a partnership with Allstate, or that a partnership is in the works to sell the naming rights of the entire league, it just hits me in all the wrong ways. And there's no real smooth transition into getting into what I want to talk about next, because that's one that just kind of like hits me all wrong. Now, actually, maybe there is. Here's my transition into one thing to the other. We did also get news over the course, speaking of NIL and all these sorts of things that are changing the sports landscape, that there's a report that Gonzaga will be part of that NIL tournament that will be happening in Vegas beginning this year. But Gonzaga will begin its participation in that tournament next season. So this is that NIL. I think it's $1 million per school that will go into the NIL fund as part of this. And this is going to be I think it's now 18 tournament that's going to be going on in Las Vegas. Again, starts this year. Gonzaga will start taking part in that next year. So it's going to be a very different outlook on what college basketball is going to look like. Gonzaga will be part of this as well. And it's a star-studded tournament. It's like, you have the Dukes, you have San Diego State. You have a lot of programs that are going to be in this thing. I'd have to go back and look at the full list of all the squads that are participating. But this is going to be much like Gonzaga. Gonzaga does not participate in good tournaments, and this is just going to be one more good tournament, one more marquee event that the Zags will be part of going into not this coming season, but the following season, the 2025-26 campaign. Now, one of the things that is coming up is the NBA draft. The NBA draft is only in a few days, and there are a couple of WCC guys who are going to be participating, have their names in the draft. We'll see if their names get called. We know about Jalen Wells from Washington State. Obviously, he didn't play in the WCC directly, but this is a school that now is entering into the WCC. And Santa Clara and a couple of others had played Washington State in the non-conference. Anton Watson is going to be another name that is potentially called. My lean is that he's going to be more summer league invitee by somebody. He'll be undrafted and he'll get picked up by somebody for the summer league. That would be my anticipation. And I do think that there's a very strong chance that Anton Watson works himself onto a G League team this coming season. I think that's where he'll start, and we'll see how it kind of grows from there. Anton Watson, we know, defensively is there. Offensively has been there when needed. I think he's going to need to showcase that offensive ability more and more in the summer league, just so that he can make the case that he can do that end of it as well on a more consistent night in, night out basis. Because even like you look at defensive guys that they can hang their hat on that. Not even actually, you go back and look at, yes, this is a decade plus ago, but Draymond Green in the Summer League was an absolute monster on the offensive end. So you can't not showcase and show out on the offensive end. So I think Anton Watson is in a good position. I think he's going to play well when he gets an opportunity in the Summer League. But he's going to have to be able to show more of the offensive attack that he does possess, and just maybe be a little bit more assertive than he was in his role at Gonzaga. And then the third is Jonathan Mogbo. And he may have been the surprise of the draft process for the WCC, to see him stay in the draft and that he's going to give it a shot. And he has slowly but surely kind of moved up in the draft boards. He started to appear in draft boards, which obviously was not the case when the offseason began. There were a lot of questions about whether or not he could do it against better opponents, but he played very well in the draft combine. He got the invite to the draft combine. So this was one who took advantage of his opportunity once he got there. And we'll talk a little bit more about it with Coach Gerlufsen about how he grew throughout the course of the season, and maybe a little bit more of like just thinking about how this player wasn't. We didn't look at him as that guy coming in, but how he took advantage of every single opportunity that he was presented with over the course of this past year, and went from relative unknown to possibly an NBA draft pick in less than a year. And we'll also talk a little bit more with him about also the returners. You have Malik Thomas returning, Marcus Williams coming back, Ryan Beasley, Dweedo Newberry, a good core, this USF group, and some key additions that are coming in, that this USF team looks like that they're going to be back in a similar position as they were a year ago. They're going to have non-conference opportunities like they did a year ago. And to get over that hump, to get to that next level, it's just about making sure you clean up some of those and pick up some of those wins you didn't have a year ago. And so USF is in a solid position. I think that they did fairly well holding on to what they had in the offseason. They did well in their additions, Jason Rivera-Torres, Carlton Lingard Jr. They added pieces that filled in some of the gaps that they had. They did lose Jonathan Mogbo. They did lose Josh Coonan. They did lose Mike Sharovjams. But with the core that they have coming back, Ryan Beasley, I love the fact that he's coming back, and that he is going to be one of the more exciting young players in the league. This is a group that looks like that they're ready to take that next step. It was a matter of, and then I said it as well, it's that they're missing that guy. And maybe one of them develops into that guy. But they also have a couple new guys coming in, and maybe this collection of really talented players will be able to get them back over the hump and back into the NCAA tournament. All right. With that, bring in head coach Chris Gerlufsen from USF, and we'll talk all about the Dons and what the kind of his outlook is going into the summer training and into the season. All right, I'm happy to bring in USF head coach Chris Gerlufsen. He's entering, I believe it's season number 3 on the Hilltop now, and it's been a really fascinating offseason for you guys. How's it been so far? And how's the team looking? I know you got your first day with them today.
Yeah, no, it's been a mile a minute. First off, thanks for having me on. Always good to connect with you and talk some WCC hoops, but we're extremely excited. It's been a chaotic kind of last few months, but one that's been really positive for us. And, we're kind of chomping at the bit to get back at it. First day of workouts today with our new group. So I don't know where the time's gone, but it's time to get back at it, and we're excited.
Yeah, you had a busy off season to this point, and you've picked up some really nice pieces to fill in some of the gaps where obviously you knew you were going to lose a few guys, and you were able to pick up Jason Rivera Torres, Carlton Lingard Jr. Just kind of talk about like what the new guys are going to kind of bring in, or like what's kind of like your outlook of what they are going to bring to the table next year.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to first make sure we added guys that were going to mesh with the current guys on the roster. And, when a season ends, you always try to reevaluate and see some of the holes or the areas that you want to continue to try to improve on. And I think we identified some of that and made sure that we added some really talented guys that are going to help continue to try to elevate our program. And Carl and Jason, I think, are going to be two guys who have great college experience already. We're going to have a chance to really be a positive impact for our team and hopefully continue the upward trend for us.
Yeah, and those two guys again, like coming from, I think it was UTSA and then also Vanderbilt. Again, like you saw Jason a year ago playing against Vanderbilt. Was when you had to play against him, was it kind of like was that an opportunity where he got put on your radar? Was like how did like these guys get kind of like make you think like these guys could be good fits with our program?
Yeah, I mean, because of the way college basketball is now, you constantly have to have your eyes open, and we're always evaluating guys on other teams and other programs, just with a casual eye. And so when we were preparing to play Vanderbilt, we always, as a staff, when we're going through the scout, kind of pick or choose one or two guys off of each team we're about to play who we would say, man, they'd be a really good fit in our program. And Jason, heading into the Vanderbilt game, I was really worried, in preparing for them about him. I just thought he had a really good talent level. I thought, for a freshman, he had some swagger to him. And so we just kind of casually kind of watched him as the year went on. Obviously, watched a lot of SEC games because watching Todd Golden at Florida, and had a chance to watch him multiple times. And when he wound up going in the transfer portal, we put our hat in the ring with him, and we're lucky to get him. So I think he's going to be a really good addition. And Carlton, we're always, looking for bigs that are skilled and have the ability to affect the game in a lot of different ways. And him being 7 foot and having the ability to step out and shoot the ball and has really good athleticism for a big, he kind of checked a lot of the boxes in terms of what we were looking for.
And I'm thinking about that, like his addition, initially it was almost like, well, that could be a great pairing with Jonathan Mogbo, who at that stage could still have return. But as we now know, Jonathan was going to stay in the NBA draft. So kind of like, how does that kind of change maybe the expectations for Carl might have been, or maybe just like, does that impact that at all based on just the roster shift that did happen in the last few weeks?
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we added someone who was going to have the ability to play with Jonathan or not play with him. And we viewed Carlton as a guy who could play one of two different positions. He played a lot at the 4 at UTSA this last year, but I think he's more naturally suited to be at the 5, especially with how we play. So we were cognizant on our end to make sure we were covering all our bases. Obviously, when the season ended, didn't know exactly what was going to happen with Jonathan, but I was sure that if he took care of his business and went through the process, I was pretty confident that he was going to stay in the draft. Our staff just thought that he would impress people the more they had a chance to see him. And so we wanted to make sure we had something kind of in the background to slide in and take his place. And I think Carlton will be a really exciting player for our program, and he'll fit in really well with DeWato Newberry. I think those guys will really have a chance to kind of play off one another.
Yeah, want to talk a little bit more about Jonathan, because again, he entered the NBA, got invited to the draft combine. He did really well there. Obviously, he caught some eyes because he ended up staying in the draft. Kind of talk about like from the time in which you recruited him a year ago and he came in, and obviously the great season that he had. What what were some of the things that you saw that led you to things like, yeah, this is a guy who's going to impress, and as even your coaches said, like this, he's got the skills. If scouts
Mhm.
whatnot get to see him, he's going to impress. What kind of talk about his journey over the last year, because obviously this is not the conversation we would have had about him a year ago, and now
Yeah.
he's here on the cusp of getting drafted.
Yeah, I think it speaks to. I mean, this is a pretty cool story. Number one, just to think about where he was a year ago to where he is right now, is pretty unheard of. You know, going from averaging 8 points and 7 rebounds to now having a chance to be a NBA draft pick. First off, speaks a lot to him and just kind of his character and his makeup. He's worked for everything he's gotten, and his path to get to this point has been, a little bit off the beaten path. Having to go to 2 different JUCOs, and he's bounced around a little bit, but he's a worker and he's a sponge, and so we had a very good idea of what he was going to be for us when we got him last year, and he blew those expectations out of the water. And he was a really fun guy to coach, because as a guy who's kind of driven offensively, it felt like every week we were finding out something new and different that he had the ability to do. And to the point where, at the end of the season, he's a guy bringing the ball up and initiating offense for us. And but that's all a credit to him. I think our system provided him the opportunity to do that. And I think it's just a really cool kind of reflection of what just an opportunity in the right place can do for you. And, he took it and ran, and I'm so proud of him. And this is part of why you coach. People say, well, aren't you so disappointed he's not coming? I'm so happy that he gets to put our name. Hopefully we hear USF's name, called on draft night, and that hasn't happened in 42 years. So it's a pretty cool experience for not only him, but our program.
Yeah, and what sort of conversations did happen at the end of the year? Did you talk to him about like what his decision making process was? Did he ask you like, hey, like, what do you think? What did he go to the coaches? What was kind of that process at the end of the year when he was starting to kind of make these decisions?
Yeah, it's funny, the night we lost in the NIT at Cincinnati, after the game, everybody was disappointed, and we were having a late dinner. And I just pulled him outside, and we kind of talked about, the next few months had a chance to get kind of crazy for him. And, he was pretty adamant about, Coach, I'm either coming back to USF or I'm going to go in the NBA draft, and did not talk about transfer portal. It was USF or NBA. And, he was very kind of clear that he was going to go through the process and see what kind of feedback he got. And as we've gone and the process is drawn out, he's had climbed up the mock drafts and the rankings, and put himself in a really good position. So the lines of communication were always open, and we have that kind of relationship, not only me with him, but our whole staff. And, again, this is part of why you coach. You want guys to have the opportunity to play at the highest level. And so we wanted to make sure we were supportive of him, throughout the whole process.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw all the skills that he really brought to the table, and as you pointed out, like, just it seemed like we started to learn more and more about the type of player and his ability, his skill set as the year went on. So I'm pulling for him too. Like, I'm again, like, I can wear the USF hat too, and like from my grad school and everything else. So yeah, I'm wishing Jonathan all the best. So with the guys that are coming back, you have a lot of really key pieces coming back. You have Marcus Williams coming back. You have you have Duito Newberry coming back. You have a lot of the key pieces returning. Kind of talk about like just maybe a little bit more of the continuity that you guys are going to have going into this year, where you didn't really have that as much going into last season.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of exciting new players, not only the transfer portal guys, but some of the freshmen that have joined our program are really excited about. But it was really important for us to kind of maintain and keep that core group together. And you have 4 guys returning who received one way or another WCC honors, in Marcus Williams and Ryan Beasley being freshman of the year in the conference, Malik Thomas, who really came on the last half of the year, and Dueto Newberry. So those are 4 guys right there that really understand and know what we're about. And there's really good continuity with those guys. And we wanted to make sure, for us to have a chance to make another jump as a program, had to keep that group together. And so I'm really excited about them. I think they're hungry to make another jump. And they're great kind of representations of what our program is all about.
Yeah. And just thinking about those key pieces again, like you have guys because it felt like, because Malik really came on really like right there in the middle of the season, and we saw what he was capable of. Marcus was kind of that guy all year long. Duito, we saw from the moments that he would have throughout the course of the year. And Ryan might be like maybe the best sophomore going into the year in the WCC, or at least like early on, you can definitely make that case. As you start to think about like how these pieces are going to intertwine with the pieces you're bringing in, how excited are you to kind of think about like where you were this past season, and maybe what you guys are the capability and what you guys have the potential of doing this coming year?
Yeah, number one, I mean, we have a lot of work to do, and that's why I'm excited to get these summer workouts going, because every team is different, and you find different strengths and weaknesses as the longer you spend with a group. So I'm excited to kind of dive in and see what the strengths are going to be of this team and what we need to get better at. But I do like our roster. I do. And I think we have a chance. And as we continue to build our program, you just want to make sure you're doing this. And so in year 1 to get 20 wins, and then to go to 23, and now we're talking about what's next, and how do we make that next jump from being a NIT team to being an NCAA tournament team. And we're going to talk about that at length and remind these guys on a daily basis just how important every day is together.
Yeah, and one of those tasks throughout the course of the season obviously is going to be picking up some of those big wins in the non-conference, and you guys have a really good opportunity in your mid multi-team event, the Sunshine Classic. You have Clemson, Fordham, Penn State, that Thanksgiving week. Kind of talk about, just again, like as you start to build this structure, the non-conference schedule, what this looks like now, knowing 18 games for WCC play. How you're starting to think about what the opportunities, and again, thinking about a year ago where there were some missed opportunities in those games, what can be done to kind of make sure, and then think about this, you have some guys who kind of went through I don't want to experience this again, and got close. Just thinking about how this is all structured, how you're structuring it, and going to pitch it to these guys with, again, a lot of really good opportunities in the non-conference.
Yeah, we want to make sure that, we're playing enough of those quality games in our non-conference schedule where if you handle your business, you have a chance to be in conversation, as the season winds down. And, so we're continuing to try to finish out our non-conference schedule here. But I think on paper, as it's become even harder to schedule at our level, because of the realignment and the Power Fives kind of almost monopolizing scheduling. I do think we've done a pretty good job of finding those quality games, in the non-conference. So we'll have Memphis here in the Chase Center. I think that'll be a really attractive kind of top 30 type game. I think they have a chance maybe even to be a top 25 team heading into the season. Our MTE, as you spoke of, I think will give us 2 really good quality opportunities. And I believe we have St. Louis coming here and playing on the Hilltop, and we're going to continue to add. We have Boise here, in San Francisco. So we're going to continue to try to add those games that have a chance to really bolster your resume. And we got to win those games, and not win all of them, but, put ourselves in the conversation. And as I said, everything is about continuing to just try to elevate our program.
And thinking about like those matchups, and obviously we talked about realignment a little bit. There are two new teams in the WCC this year: Washington State and Oregon State. Obviously, being two West Coast teams, pretty familiar with at least like what they're about and who they look like. Even though I think both those teams are going to look wildly different than they did a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of talk about just the addition of those two, at least for the next couple of years. And then also we had the announcement of Grand Canyon in Seattle just a few weeks ago as well. And then they're coming in. Grand Canyon, obviously a team that you guys are familiar with, have been matched up with them a few times over the last few years.
Yeah, I think in the short term, adding Oregon State and Washington State, I think it was a really kind of calculated, smart move by Stu Jackson and his staff, in the conference office. I think that just on paper, it has a chance to give us two more quality opponents in the league, and I think each of those teams has a chance to be, top 100 type teams, which is good for our league. Two really good coaches in David Riley and Wayne Tinkle, both those guys, really impressive. And those will be positives for our league, in the short term. And then to have the chance to add Seattle U and Grand Canyon, again, two really quality programs, two quality coaches. And I think it's all about how do we raise the profile of the WCC, and so I like just kind of the forward action by Stu and his staff in terms of trying to, again, just elevate our league. And we know how good it is. You know how good it is and how competitive it is. But now it's time to hopefully the rest of the country can see, just how good it is.
Yeah, these four definitely are going to like raise at least the amount of attention over the next few years. And it's going to be wild. Back to 11 teams this coming season, up to 13 next year, which will be a different wild conversation and conference play to be had. There's one more thing as we kind of like hit the road. What have you been able to actually get off the coaching train at all? Because again, like I know, like you had, like we went straight into the recruiting season. You're starting off practice this week. Have you been able to have a break and have been able to get out of town any?
It's been tough. We've found a couple days here or there, to try to recharge and unwind a little bit. But just given the calendar and the way that the portal is gone, it's been tough. But we'll find some time to recharge in August. I think that'll be a good time for our staff and our team, as we head into the new year. But it's a new world we're living in for sure. And I think it's important though, too, to find ways to kind of detach and get away and recharge. And, but we'll get to that in August once we get through our summer workouts.
All right. Thanks, Coach, for hopping on. It's always great to talk with you. And we will definitely catch up as we get a little closer to the season.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Zach.
I want to thank head coach Chris Gerlufsen one more time for hopping on. It's always great to be able to chat with him. This USF team I think is in a good spot. They're looking like they've at least put together another solid group going into the year. They're going to have great opportunities in the non-conference, but they got to be able to take advantage of them. They did not a year ago, and they're going to get more shots at it at the apple this year. And if they can, yes, that will put them in position to potentially earn an at-large bid. I do think that the climbing of the conference this year, while there might be questions about St. Mary's, there are no questions about Gonzaga. And we know how they have loaded up this roster. You bring in Khalif Battle, you bring in Michael Ajayi, you hold on to a lot of the core pieces as well. You get a year older of Dusty Stromer. You get a healthy Steel Venters. Their last edition, which just did come out on Monday, coming in from Real Madrid in Spain, Ismaila Diagne is coming in as well, giving them another really talented piece that's going to kind of be part of their developmental track, as they've kind of put together kind of two stages of what Gonzaga is going to have. They have who's going to help them now and who's going to help them down the road. This team, this Gonzaga squad now legitimately will go 9-10 deep as far as guys who are going to be able contributors to this squad and what they can do. Yes, that it does mean that this is a team that will be ranked high early on, and they rightfully so. This was a team that still was on the cusp of another WCC championship. Yes, St. Mary's won it outright, but they did split with St. Mary's in the regular season. They also did make it back to the Sweet 16 for the 9th straight year. So this squad in an off year still got back to where they had been every year for the past decade. And they will go for that 10th straight Sweet 16 bid this year. They're probably in position to do far better than that Sweet 16 prediction. They're probably going to be, in many people's eyes, a early Final Four pick. They may even be the title pick for at least a few people, because this team is deeper than the team a year ago. They're more experienced now than the team was a year ago. And now there's not this heavy, heavy reliance upon that backcourt of Nolan Hickman and Ryan Nembhard, because those two played so many minutes. They both averaged 35 minutes a game last year. But now you have some pieces that will be able to give them a break every once in a while and be able to really kind of step in for them. And give this team to me, looks like it's going to be more balanced than it was a year ago. And that's saying something, because it was pretty balanced a year ago, but you'll have more of the load come off of that starting 5 unit, and you'll have more responsibility on the rest of the bench unit, which wasn't the case last year, nor was it fair based on the composition of the bench a year ago as well. But a year older, this group weathered the storm, got through a lot of tough times last year where a lot of people looked at them and thought they were dead in the water. And that wasn't the case. They were the same. They ended up being in the same place every Gonzaga team has been over the last 9 years. And the consistency of that program, and the fact that they were able to reload this year, adding on to what they already was going to be probably a top 15 team, just speaks to the work that Mark Few has done. It speaks to the work of the image of that program, because you also see the direct line more and more of Gonzaga to the NBA as well, which makes it just that much more attractive for guys coming in to say, this is a professional basketball track that guys that go to Gonzaga also end up in the NBA, but also are successful in the NBA. And we're going to look at any number of examples. Chad Holmgren, Andrew Nembhard, Jalen Suggs, when healthy, is also on that list. Kelly Olynyk's been in the league for 10 plus years. You have a lot of guys to fall back on to kind of look at, like, hey, here are very successful Zags. Demontis Sabonis in Sacramento as well. And the squad looks like it's going to be as strong, if not stronger, than any of the teams we've seen in the last 10 years. I don't know if they're quite as talented as, say, the team in 21 or the team in 17, but this team is going to be just as deep and and is going to have a lot of the pieces necessary to get them down the road and further into the NCAA tournament. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and follow along on social media at Unofficial WCC Pod on Instagram and Unoff WCC Pod on Twitter. All right, I'll wrap it up. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will catch you later.